Hello and welcome to Hampton 3 Gallery Coffee and Conversation. I'm Luke DeLello, the curator here, and today we have a conversation with Luke Allsbrook, who has a new solo show with us. So Luke, let's talk a little bit about how you started, because you were in Augusta, right?
Yes, and can I just say quick, I just want to say thank you for everybody that came. I really appreciate that.
So who was one of your first painting teachers?
Well,
Somebody we might know?
yeah, my first painting teacher actually wasn't quite my first, almost my first, was Ed Rice. He's here today. Really thank him for coming. I did my first oil painting with Ed Rice when I think it was like fourth grade, a little landscape. Ed Rice taught me all the way through high school.
So what were the main takeaways that you got from Ed?
I think he just instilled in me a love of seeing, love of looking, perceiving what's there, perceiving the beauty of what's there, particularly light, what light does and the beauty of light, the beauty of precision in art. That wasn't a thing that was applauded much when I was coming through art school. It's like you should be jumping on one leg and slashing paint around, and so the beauty of precision. There is freedom in art, but there also has to be precision. So I think Ed Rice definitely taught me that, taught me a love for the appreciation of that.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Ed Rice is one of the best Southern painters out of Augusta. He's shaking his head, but he knows it. Ed, how long have you been with us? I can't remember. 40 years was the answer. We've had the pleasure a couple of times to have a teacher and a student, and that's something that as a gallery we really focus on, is trying to continue the tradition of art that's from the South, specifically South Carolina. And I think people don't appreciate sometimes the tradition that some of the artists in the South have from teacher to student, and it's so huge to pass that perception on, that way of seeing. You're talking about light. I think sometimes Southern artists see light better because we have so many different kinds of light. We have the light you get in the sunrise, the light you get in the low country, the light you get in the mountains. It's all different kinds of light. And if you see this show, there's so many different scenes and so many different light settings, and most people can't see that well. And it really takes a strong teacher, but then also strong natural ability and bend with the eye to be able to capture that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So where'd you go after Augusta?
I was looking for a college that had a good traditional art department. I found Indiana University, and that's where I went.
Was that when they were good at basketball?
They had a great reputation. Bobby Knight was still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then you went to New York, right?
Yep. Right after college, got married, moved straight to New York City. I went to New York because I'd always done landscape, starting with Ed, and I wanted to learn the figure. So the New York Academy is all about the figure. You study the figure for 2 years. So that's what I did.
How much of a change was it going from Indiana to New York?
Well, yeah, huge. When we were newly married, that was our first apartment. So I remember my parents driving off in the moving truck, and we said goodbye, and it was a very desolate feeling, like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? But yeah, New York City, we lived there for 9 years, loved it. We just loved living there.
And you were in Brooklyn, right?
No, we were in Manhattan.
Manhattan,
we were,
okay.
right near, if you know New York City, it's right where John Lennon lived. We were kind of right down the street from there, so near Central Park.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you taught a lot while you were there, right?
I did. I started teaching. I taught at William Patterson University, and I taught at New York Academy and Lime Academy, wherever I could get a job.
Even Italy.
Yeah, that's right.
Talk about Italy a little bit.
Oh, well, I had gone to Italy as a student on the Cortona program at UGA, so it was my great dream to go back as a teacher, and I did that. And honestly, the teaching was a total disaster. It was, that was my teaching time.
What was a disaster about it?
I don't even know if I want to get into that.
Okay, never mind.
It was a learning experience.
Gotcha. You had a very interesting experience painting for a now king. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so that was definitely a case of being in the right place at the right time. I'd been on a painting trip in Normandy, and there was a British painter there, and she met me, and we kind of hit it off. And she was teaching at the Prince's Drawing School.
Prince Charles.
Yeah, the Prince's Drawing School. And whenever the Prince goes on a state tour, he takes an artist with him to document the trip and also to be a patron, So he was coming to America with the Duchess. It was her first time, and he was touring organic farms in California. And he wanted to an American artist. This British artist said, look, I know an American artist. He paints farmland. And so they called me up.
And that was Camilla's first state visit.
Yeah. And basically, we would get to an organic farm, and the entourage would tour the farm, and I would jump out in my suit and my paints, and as quickly as I could do a painting, because the golden rule was if the motorcade left without you, that was the end. Yeah, you couldn't do that.
Any anecdotes from talking with the Prince and Camilla?
My most striking memory was at the very end. We were in a hotel in San Francisco, and they came to my room. They wanted me to bring all my paintings I'd done to their hotel room. My heart was kind of beating, but what was amazing about it was the activity. Like, you can imagine all the chaos, all the staff, luggage, and just the security. There's lots of activity. And then you got to his hallway, and it was a little quieter. And then you got to a little anteroom, and it was really, really quiet. And there was just one guy, and he said, all right, you can go in here. And then I walked in, and the Prince and Camilla were just sitting there in this perfectly quiet room where they were keeping it peaceful for him so he could function. And it was like they were very, very nice. But that was kind of an interesting window. Sometimes I had to bite my tongue when I was walking. There'd be photographers, and I was like, what am I doing here? All the paparazzi, yeah.
Oh, you got a question already? Go ahead.
Yeah, please. They actually took all of the little paintings that I'd done, and then it's traditional for the artist to give them a painting. So I took one of the studies and made a bigger painting, and I gifted that to them. He purchased all the little ones, so it was exciting.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit now about technique and then theory, because you and I have opinions
All right.
about theory. But why don't we talk about this behemoth over there? For those who are listening to this, Luke brought his setup, his easel that he built himself. So why don't you walk us through this contraption real quick?
When you paint outside, definitely half the battle, at least half the battle, is having a good setup that is stable, especially when you're doing big paintings like some of these where I did most of these on site. You can't have something that will blow away. So it's hard to find. I don't know if you can buy an outdoor easel that will hold big paintings. So, and I like to design things, so I built that. You have to bungee cord it down and stake it down if you have a big canvas, because it will take off. That's half the battle, having a setup that works so you can focus on doing the painting.
Talk a little bit about your process. First, I think we kind of skipped that you moved from New York to Waynesville.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that move.
Well, New York outpriced us, basically. I had 2 kids when we left, and we were missing nature, missing family. So when I moved to Waynesville, I was kind of a bit of an idiot. I didn't realize the treasure trove of landscape I was getting ready to move into. Waynesville has, obviously, you can get up in the mountains, but there's farmland, there's rivers, there's lakes. It's just endless. And also, I think mountain landscape provides a lot of opportunities for looking at things abstractly, because big shapes are happening all over the place. So that's been great.
For those who don't know, most of these paintings are from Waynesville, some of them from one farm. You want to talk about that farm a little bit?
Yeah, the farm I've been working on the last 2 years, it's been in their family, I think, 5 generations at least. The farmhouse is from the 1800s, and usually what I do, I'll go and paint on the edge of a farm, like from the road, and then you get to know people, and these people have been really nice to let me go on their farm, and it's a really big farm. I was telling Luke, a lot of these places in the mountains, I don't think I have a painting from the place I'm talking about, but it's right near there. I'd done all these paintings along a river, and 2 weeks ago, I was driving out there, and in one morning, it was just, there were all these bulldozers and excavators out there. It was just wiped clean. All the trees, everything was just gone. You could get into the environmentalism of that. It's not where I want to go. What I thought about is, wow, life is short, and you don't know each day the opportunity you have to experience something beautiful or see something beautiful or capture something beautiful. It's not forever. So all the stuff you're seeing here, these are family farms. A lot of them will probably be sold when it goes to the next generation and be developed. It's a disappearing landscape. It's a disappearing era of those farms.
And that's, in a strange way, sort of a connecting point to a lot of the artists that we work with here at Hampton 3 Gallery. Stephen Chesley documents Old Columbia, before it was what it is today, and the Outer Banks before it is. Ed Rice has Augusta, Leo Twiggs Orangeburg, Halsey Charleston. There seems to be a bend with a lot of the artists that we work with to catch it before it's gone. Because, I mean, even in my lifetime, I grew up in Greenville when it was a swamp. Everybody talks about how amazing Greenville is now. It was a mud pit when I grew up downtown. There was no bridge. There was none of this architecture that is so famous today. But there's always something that's lost when the new comes in. And there's something so unique about these old American farms, especially in Appalachia, that economy is gone now compared to where it was. And that way of living is gone now. And if it's not caught right now, it'll just be forgotten. That's something that I'm passionate about with the artists that I work with is really trying to create not just a written memory, but a visual memory of these places, because an image sometimes says it so much more powerfully than just reading about an experience. Being able to see the light, the way it came off the mountains, the way it hit the grass.
Mr. Rice, you probably could speak to this more than me, but there's obviously a tradition of this in art history. You think about the Hudson River School. When they came here, they viewed this as a pristine wilderness. They felt they were painting Eden, and it was disappearing in its own way. So, and I'm sure there are other examples in art history. And
talk a little bit about Wyeth, because that was an inspiration for you,
yeah,
correct?
Wyeth was my first love. What I loved early on was something about the quiet beauty of his painting. So Wyeth talks about sometimes he'd be walking on a farm, he'd see a tuft of hair from a cow on a barbed wire, and that just like really moved him. Like I identify with that. There's something like quiet, but really, I don't know, it's deep, it's like, it's emotive, like it moves you, you know? I respond to that. I identify with that in art.
And I think that is another major connecting point about Southern artists is that they see those details and they know what they are and they care about them. Like they catch that little detail and then bring it to an audience to show it to them. Because people may not be able to go to these places and see these places in person, but it's not just seeing the place, it's how you see it. It's not just seeing the fence, it's seeing the cow hair on the fence.
Yeah, and sometimes, that's a great thing about being a realist artist. Sometimes you're painting things and you don't know what it is, but just the fact that you're being faithful to the subject matter, somebody else will go, hey, they'll recognize it. It has a touchstone for somebody else just because you're being faithful to what you see. So, yeah.
Okay, let's open the can of worms and talk about abstraction versus realism.
Okay. Yeah.
Just go. I'm going to get out of your way.
Well, I ate breakfast at a friend of mine. They had an abstract paint on the wall, so I can't be too derisive of abstract painting. But what I really wanted to say is, there are lots of different kinds of painting. When you walk in a museum, there are lots of different great traditions. But I think what I'd want to say about abstraction, I think it's a misunderstood term. It does describe a certain period of art history or kind of art. But abstraction, it's a very important concept because it just means the way something looks. In other words, when I'm looking out at you all, the reason I know you're people and you're out there looking at me, a certain pattern of color and shapes reaches my eye and lets me know what it is. It's the same thing for a sky or a tree or water. Like, how do you paint water? Well, you just paint it like anything else. You paint the pattern of color that's reaching your eye, and if you do that faithfully, it will look like water. It's like if I look at Mr. Rice back there, if I perfectly copy the pattern of darks and lights on his face, you guys will go, oh, that's Ed Rice. And I think every great painting, whether they're realistic or you can't tell what it is, they have to utilize powerful abstract sense. Abstraction is the vehicle of the painting.
The comment that I often get on your work from like someone who may see it online in like a tiny little image is like, oh, is that a photograph? And I'd be like, no. And when people come in and view the work, a lot of times I'm terrible, but what I'll do is like, go put your nose 2 inches away from the painting. And when they do that, they go, it's an abstract painting. And I'm like, you're seeing the strokes, you're seeing the technique, because these are paintings, they're not photographs. You cannot capture light this way in a photograph. Because what a painting does that a photograph can't is that you are still selecting which light you're showing. That's not all of the light. That's not all of the shapes. That's not all of the colors. There is a distillation that happens because you're using pigment, you're using paint, and you're using a paintbrush. What our minds do all the time when we see something like what Luke was saying is that you never see all of it. Your brain could not handle seeing all of it. you can only see so much of, you read somebody's face and go, that's that person. But you're not looking at every pore like you're watching a movie or seeing a still image. I think that's why painting sometimes can go so much deeper into the emotion than a photograph can, because it's cutting out the distraction and helping you see the light that you wouldn't have caught by being distracted by everything going on. Would you say that that's fair? Or
I think, like I said, there's lots of great traditions of art. Photography is one of them.
Yeah.
Photography does a certain thing. It does things that painting can't do, and painting does things that photography can't do. I mean, one thing that painting does, like these paintings, I can't walk up to that scene and see a beautiful moment of light and just click the camera and capture it all. It's impossible. Painting can't do that. But something that can do that photography can't do, I can come to that place at the same time of day over 3 weeks. And the painting, I might see one thing one day, one thing another minute, a moment of light, a cloud, whatever. And so the painting becomes not about one single moment, but my experience of that place. That's also what painting can do over a film. Because if you think about film, a film is, I don't know, thousands of frames, right, strung together. That's one frame. But I can pour, if I want to, hundreds of hours into one frame. So just looking at that one frame, you're feeling all that mileage, hopefully.
And then you start your paintings on site, but you finish them in the studio.
Usually,
right?
I try and stay in front of what I'm painting as much as possible. Part of that is I just love being outside. I love being out there actually more than painting. So I just love standing there and just taking it in and looking at it. You talked about photography. Photography is a powerful tool for painters. I definitely use a lot of photography. I think you mentioned all the information out there. In my opinion, photography gives you a thin slice of reality. When you're out there, you're trying to take in all of it. Your eye can zoom in on things. It adjusts for light and color, and obviously there's sound and wind, and the whole experience of photography is very useful for certain things, but there's also something really special about experiencing something in the round.
How do you make those decisions?
Okay, the question is about how do you make decisions about contrast and composition?
Well, that's a big topic. There's a lot of different things. Usually when you take a photograph, the photograph is usually more contrasty. In other words, your eye can see the lightness of something and look into that. Then your eye can also look into the shadow of something and adjust to that and see into the shadow. It is like if you look at the painting of the barn, when you squint your eyes and you're in the barn, there's a balance. Because the greater contrast you get, there's often more drama. And yet, if you paint everything just dark shadow, you're trying to pull up the lights in the shadow as much as you can without destroying the beauty of the contrast between the light and the dark. In other words, you want the drama of light versus shadow, but you also want to you're always trying to pump up the value of your shadows so it's not just black, right? You're just bringing it right to the breaking point. At least that's what I find I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to hint at earlier, because my background's in film, which is very photographic. The camera is a mechanism, it's a machine. And so you're dialing it in to see a certain way. And so it hits all the details, like you were saying, in a very thin slice.
Right.
People forget that the eye is an organ. Like, it's something that you can focus on a color. Like, we can look at that, and I can look at the painting about jewelweed, and I can focus on the orange. That changes the way I see the painting. Like, it's an organic thing that's happening. It's not just static. And so when you do a painting, you can take all of those moments of looking into the shadows and your eye adjusting to the shadows. Like, anybody's woken up in the darkness and your eyes adjust, right? Like, your eyes start seeing the darkness, or the sun's too bright and then your eyes adjust to the brightness. A phone or a camera can't do that. You have to pick one slice and that's it. And what a painting can do is it can fill in all those gaps. It can take all those adjustments and amalgamate them and create a true feeling of what it was like to be in that space for a long period of time, rather than being purely mechanical. Does that make sense?
Sometimes I liken it to relationships with people. Like, if I sit down and talk with somebody, that's a very different experience than talking on the phone. would be one step removed, right? Or a text is even one more step removed. But when you're face to face with somebody, it's like they're everything, all your senses are engaged. And I mean, as an artist, you can't capture that. You can try, you can take a big leap. When you're out there looking at this stuff, you can say, well, I'm going to take a big leap and see if I can capture what's here. Like Ian Forster said, art's like trying to catch a winged horse. So you're just taking a leap at something. I sometimes tell people I'm not a painter that actually just like loves to paint. I think there are painters who they just want to be painting all the time. I have to be really moved and excited about what I'm seeing to drive the painting. I just don't love painting enough to sit and paint something I'm not super excited about. I go to the beach every summer and there's some more paintings on the other side of this wall of Topsail. So I've always done paintings at Topsail, and I like painting the figure. So I'm always thinking of ways to put the figure into scenes. And that was actually talking about doing different ways of doing paintings of photography. This was actually from on 4th of July night, I just hit a little picture on my iPhone. So the whole thing is done from a little, grainy iPhone photo. So yeah, it's a very romantic scene. Not because of the figures, I mean romantic because the time of day and the one green light, it's called signal light on the sound. So the one signal light that's blinking in the distance. So it's really about the beauty of that time of day. And then it was an empty pier, and I wanted to fill it with figures somehow, maybe because it was 4th of July when I clicked the scene. And I thought about, there's a Winslow Homer painting of figures dancing in the moonlight. Maybe I was thinking of that. That would never happen on this pier, this scene. My dad looked at us like, I've never seen that scene on this pier. He says, well, he's kind of right. But and some of it in a painting, an artist, you just want to try something for the challenge of it. So painting all those little figures, kind of making them up and figuring out how to compose them on there was a challenge. Try and get those figures to sit in that space was a kind of a challenge I wanted to take on.
One of my favorite paintings of figures that you did was, it's like, I think it's because I really related to it as a kid. It's that part where there's a party going on and the adults are like saying 15 minutes, time to go.
Oh, right.
And the kids are like hiding off to the side because like they're going to forget.
Yeah.
They're gonna tell one more joke, and that one more joke might be 45 minutes. So they're like off to the side where the parents can't see them in the yard, and you're looking in on the party. Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite pieces. We had that, I think, in your last show here. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that will break you of your self-consciousness of painting in public. Because when you set up your easel on the streets of New York, most people just ignore you because it's like you're going to see everything under the sun in New York City. But I got to tell you, one of my favorite comments was in New York. These two young guys came by and they stopped. And he's like, hey, man, they said, come over here. Come and look at this. And they called another guy over. And the guy came up and he looked right at it. And he goes, damn. He goes, that looks just like the mother effer. So I was like, that's a good compliment. I appreciate that. Yeah. I was there from 95 to 2004. So, I was there during 9/11. No, I never had a knack for comics, caricature drawing. I cannot do it. Like if a little kid comes up to me at a party and says, hey, you're an artist, can you draw me a picture of a dog? I'm like, I get scared. It's like, it's hard. I'm mainly a perceptual painter. So no, I'm no good at caricatures. I cannot do it. I really can't. It's hard to say. I would say I went on site. So like you can only stay on site as long as the light is somewhat constant. So maybe 2 hours I'm there. And so maybe I went to that scene, 10 times on site. And then when I brought it back to the studio, I probably worked on it in the studio, a couple weeks. So it's got a lot of time in there. Yeah, I hardly ever do that. When I'm there, my goal is to try and be faithful to what I'm seeing. There's a quote, he said, bow to nature and she will bow to you. So that's more my aim. Now, there's parts in a landscape, they're either in movement or they're so complex. In other words, you have to switch into sort of a making up mode because you can't copy it exactly. It's just too complex. So, for instance, all the limbs, you can't copy every single limb exactly as it was. You have to see what's the feel of those limbs to try and capture it. So in sense of adding stuff, I guess there's sometimes you do have to make up things. No, it's done with I was talking to someone else. It's done with a liner brush. It's a thin brush with the long hairs. It's like an inch long, but you know what that's about is just layering up, because when you think about grass, it's like you can put your hands all the way in it, right? So you want to feel all the layers, and that's exactly what you do. You layer up the painting slowly, layer it, so you get a sense that you're looking through the light blades deep into the shadow, deep under, all the way to the ground. Speaking of detail, I have a maxim, which is the details are always in rebellion against the greater relationship. So that's the danger. We talked about abstraction. The more detail you do, the more you're in danger of wrecking the bigger relationship. That's always the case. You know, as you're pushing detail, you're always trying to keep the original big shape, the big color field, whatever it is. That's a real challenge. Yeah, just like in your life. You know, in your life you get drawn into the details, and then you're all of a sudden you're not doing the main thing you're supposed to be doing. It's exactly the same thing happens in a painting. At least I find that. It really didn't happen like that. Everything you said is exactly right. But, you know, when I was in college, I thought, well, maybe I should do medical illustration. And then there was a fork in the road there. I said, no, I want to do fine art. So I thought, well, I'm going to be a college professor. So I started applying for those jobs. That's when I was in New York. And I applied to those jobs for 6-7 years and never could land one. Well, all the time my paintings were selling more and more. So I finally realized, well, my greatest chance of making an income is with my paintings. And I'm even like that today. I'm like, well, because painting sales go up and down. And so sometimes, well, maybe I should do something else. Well, this is the best chance I've got to make income, so I'm going to keep going. So it is about perseverance, just not giving up. But part of it's that what else are you going to do? You can just keep going. Well, I was fortunate in a lot of ways. I'll tell you, my brother-in-law is here. He works at Furman. He's in the religion department, and I know enough about his world that I would have had a big target on my back all the time, and I would not have made it, I don't think. So I've worked much better alone. Yeah, I think they just saw me drawing, spaceships and this, that, and the other. I've seen a lot of parents, really pushing their kids in art. It becomes like this performance thing. My parents, they never, ever pushed me to do it, but they were great to find great teachers for me when I wanted to. But I remember one Saturday, I was like, Dad, I don't feel like going to, I was a little kid. I don't feel like, he's like, well, don't go. So it was very much a voluntary thing. Yeah. That was the other piece I was going to say. They always supported me. And especially in that time where I thought, should I do medical illustration shows? They always like, you could do it. Yeah. So they were very much, they didn't make me do it, but they also didn't fall in the other camp, which I've seen some parents like, how are you going to make money doing that? It's like, well, it's actually a good question, but anyways, they never did that to me. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I can't speak to it because I don't know enough about it, but I will tell you this. I did an internship at MCG for medical illustration. At that time, they were still doing one of the classic techniques, which was they take dust from a pencil, scrape it on like sandpaper, and then they dip their brush into that dust, and they used to make these incredible photorealistic images with that technique. But I imagine that's a thing of the past.
But if you go into medical illustration, doesn't mean you can't be a fine artist, because one of our artists that we work with, Janet Dreskin, she went to Johns Hopkins for medical illustration and then transitioned into fine art and took a lot of the techniques she learned at Johns Hopkins, and her work's amazing. So you never know. Like, it's never a straight path. You can go a lot of different ways.
That's right.
Well, we're going to wrap up there, but we want to thank you guys so much for coming and supporting our events here. We love putting them on, helping expose the public to both South Carolinian and Southern art in general, because there's just so much great that's going on here that we're so pleased to have the opportunity to work with. So thank you, Luke, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank Ed Rice and everyone else who came along, and we'll be around, so don't run away. We're happy to talk to you guys.
Thank you all. Thank you.